It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Meyers. The Verdict is brought to you in part by Betcher, Martin, Jean, and Jackson, when hurt people need help. Betcher, Martin, Jean, and Jackson in Ponca City. It's time for The Verdict.
Good morning, I'm Kent Meyers, and welcome to The Verdict this Sunday. We are going to change the pace a little bit today. We're going to talk about college athletics and the challenges that colleges and universities face in fielding athletic teams, and we're going to have a real expert in that regard join us. Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, is going to come on and visit with you about several really interesting subjects. Such as whether the Bowl Championship Series format ought to be revised, whether we ought to be paying athletes to play at the college level, and just what some of Joe's secrets are and how he finds good coaches to hire, and he's got a proven track record there. We're pleased to welcome today as a new sponsor the Betcher, Martin, Jean, and Jackson firm where hurt people get help. We're pleased to have them join us as a sponsor on The Verdict. They're a fine organization. So stick with us. We'll be right back with Joe Castiglione. We're back, and welcome again to The Verdict, and we are very pleased today to have a return guest for us, making his third appearance on The Verdict, Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma. Joe has been the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma since 1998. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland and came to us through the University of Missouri route. He's headed both the Big 12 athletic directors and the Division 1A athletic directors organizations. He has been the president of the National Association of Collegiate Athletic Directors. Since he's been at OU, he's delivered 4 national champions and 19 conference champions to the Norman campus. And I guess as important as anything else, OU was first in the Big 12 in graduation rate in 2003, something that I'm sure all of us are proud of for our student athletes. And we're really pleased, Joe, you would join us again. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, Kent. Good to be with you again.
Well, we've just got a lot to talk about today, and I want to start out with something that's been hot controversy at least up till recently, and maybe still is, and that's the Bowl Championship Series, the BCS, and the split national championships and who gets to play and all. Just very briefly for our viewers, the current format of the BCS includes an agreement with 6 conferences and 4 bowl games. And they take the 6 conference champions, I guess, and add 2 at-large positions, and that's who gets to play. That, of course, excludes many, many, many schools. But this is a private arrangement between the Bowl Championship Series, the conferences, and the bowls themselves. You obviously have been on top of all this controversy. What do you think, if anything, needs to be done in regard to the BCS format?
Well, Kent, first let's make one point, that controversy doesn't always have to infer something negative.
Yeah.
The idea that people are debating what's going on in college football actually is something very positive for college football. Having said that, we realize that this system isn't perfect. it was said at the outset of the BCS arrangement that it was an imperfect system. It had flaws. We were going to have to work through them. And to a large extent, we have. Between the end of the past college football season and the beginning of the one here later this fall, there will be some changes, maybe even tweaks, if you will. But it will stay in place. And probably something along that line will stay in place for the foreseeable future. The college presidents don't have any interest whatsoever in getting into an NFL-style playoff. I know there are a lot of people that would like to see a college playoff, and it would solve a couple of the problems that people point to as the flawed issues in the BCS. But let's remember why the BCS was put into place. We were to take a bowl arrangement that historically has been very positive for college football and try to find a way to assure ourselves the number 1 versus number 2 team would play at the end of the season in one of those bowls. And a lot of the traditional bowls, Rose, Orange, Sugar, Cotton was in the mix at that time, and of course Fiesta, wanted to be considered, in that particular package. And to keep them all strong, they agreed that they would host this so-called national championship game in a rotation. So once every 4 years, one of those bowl games becomes the host. That way they can keep, some strength in those bowl games in those years they don't host it. And it's worked pretty doggone well. Without some of the flaws that we may talk about, it has worked. It has kept college football in the forefront, and the bowl system in general is strong and it's alive. And that is very, very important to college football. And finally, and probably most importantly, it has really enhanced the importance of the regular season on campuses all across this country. And that, Kent, is probably the number 1 focus in any kind of model that we would view going forward.
I noticed in the media generally, particularly through fan talk, that there's a couple of misconceptions that I want your view about. First is that somehow the NCAA has something to do with setting up the BCS or controlling the BCS. That's not true, is it?
That's a misnomer. Obviously, we all operate within and under NCAA legislation and rules and so on of college football, but the actual bowl system is, in a sense, outside of the NCAA, and for the most part, it always has been. The NCAA has a connection, but they don't run it. These are all separate businesses, if you will. Yeah. There are what, now 26 separate businesses?
Yes, 26
which is another point for another day, but by and large, this is a system outside, and the commissioners, acting on behalf of all the member institutions they represent, had formed this union in trying to find a way to address the bowl system. You might remember the way bowls were done in the past, where a conference had a relationship with a single bowl. Sometimes that conference had the number 1 or number 2 team in the country, and another conference did, but they had those bowl tie-ups and they could never get together, and now they left the debate open for media, fans, and so on to reflect in the national polls. Well, this is try to work all of that together and find a way again to make sure that the 1 versus 2 team faces each other at the end of the year.
Well, it's nice to have this much interest in
Absolutely.
It fills the stadiums.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you another question. I think it's true, but I'll be a little more careful about asking the question. I think in every other sport played in collegiate athletics, at least in the NCAA jurisdiction, there is a designated NCAA recognized national champion. Mm-hmm. Now, I may be wrong about that, but I believe that to be correct. Why do you suppose it is that the NCAA doesn't recognize officially a national championship or champion in Division I-A football?
It's simply because of the setup with the college bowl system. It has generally been outside of the NCAA. And to bring that in essence, make it the same as every other NCAA championship event would cause a lot of different things to happen that don't happen right now. Probably, mostly, if not exclusively, related to revenue sharing. Mm-hmm. And that everything we do in the NCAA is shared equally amongst all institutions. Well, you have such a discrepancy between football playing institutions at the Division I level, hence the 1A, 1AA, 1AAA designation. Furthermore, because it's been set up that way, there is specific legislation that deal with rules on certain campuses, scholarship limits and the like, related to those programs that have designated themselves in such a manner. Again, it's probably related to revenue generation on the campus, and then at the postseason, revenue sharing to the rest of the schools. And that's been the traditional setup, and why some people don't want to necessarily move back that way.
Take a lot of change, wouldn't it?
It would.
Well, let's get ready to take a break, and when we come back, I want to ask you about an equally interesting topic, which is pay for play. Should we be paying college athletes? Let's take a break. We're visiting with Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma. We'll be right back. And we're back with Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, talking about some topics that are pretty hot in college athletics nowadays. Joe, before we went on the break, we kind of generally introduced the subject of pay for play, the argument being athletics generates, in some institutions at least, quite a bit of revenue for the university. But for the athletes, that revenue would not be generated. Why shouldn't they get a share of it? Without regard to that particular question, what's your view on pay for play, and what problems does it bring about?
Well, I'm for anything that can enhance the experience of student athlete or their ability to enjoy their years on our campus. Having said that, I am not for pay for play. Never have been, never will be. It is a slippery slope as far as I'm concerned in college athletics. It's some door that once we would open it, we'd never be able to close. And if you're to say, oh, come on, they used to do it. They used to give them some laundry money. It used to be 25 bucks a month. Make it 100 bucks a month. Well, as soon as it becomes 100 bucks a month, then it needs to be 150 or 200 and so on. I think what people overlook, maybe even the student athletes themselves, is the fact that, one, we're not talking solely about pay for play in one sport, although those people who try to propose such an idea focus on a football or a basketball because they are solely revenue sports. What we're talking about is paying, in our case, 400 and some student athletes. You don't think
in many different sports.
In many different sports. You think, one sport is less likely or less needy to need some help versus another sport. It can't. You're talking about having to do something across the board. Secondly, what gets overlooked is what it costs the institution to create the best experience for that student athlete. Of course, a scholarship is, ranges from 10 to 30,000, on a campus, which would generally be the tuition fees, room, board, books equation. But it doesn't stop there. We hire and try to keep the best teachers. We call them coaches. Yeah. We try to get them the best equipment. They travel the right way. They have facilities that are generally state-of-the-art. All of that requires a significant expense on behalf of the student athletes, but by the institution. And so if one were to sort of extrapolate this, out, you're talking in some cases 60, 70, maybe as much as $100,000 a year in certain sports to put that athlete on the field. And that is a significant expense that never gets talked about. And maybe we in college athletics need to do a better job of educating the public to that end. And last but not least, people want to focus solely on those universities that are making significant revenue off of football, off of basketball, when we know, by and large, the other sports we sponsor, while important and while part of the overall mission of an athletic program or a campus, don't make more revenue than football or basketball, or certainly don't make revenue over and above the expense it takes to put those sports on the fields, courts, tracks, mats, whatever it might be. And again, we look at college athletics in a Division I-A level, Kent. Only 18% of the programs are finishing in the black financially at the end of the year. So you're talking about the vast majority of athletic programs losing money. And if we add this part into the equation, well, obviously the debt grows even further.
Well, the debate might change if the pay-for-play proposal was we can do it if we can raise taxes on the citizens to pay for it.
Right. But again, I think it's still important for campuses to find ways within the rules, still make it a great experience for student athletes. And that can come in a lot of different ways before pay-for-play.
Well, it seems to me that the college scholarship that a athlete gets is a very significant benefit. And let's take the typical athlete. Let's take a typical football player, if you will, that plays 5 years. Do they have the scholarship for 5 years?
Yeah.
If they get an extra year for some reason, like Jason White,
yeah.
Do they get an extra year scholarship?
They could.
Yeah.
But generally, most of those student athletes are finishing their degree, and now they're working on a master's degree. But yes, they can get some aid.
Well, let me change the subject. I think if you have a hallmark of your short but successful career at OU thus far, it's been your talent for hiring coaches that have turned out to be really top-notch citizens and teachers. What is Joe Castiglione's Wizard of Oz formula for selecting coaches? Do you have a list in your jacket right now of who you'd call if Bob Stoops resigned? I mean, how do you go about planning ahead for resignations and replacements?
Well, as you know, Kent, my first order of business is to try to keep our coaches here as long as we can. But our business is so competitive and things change, environments change, that at some point we're going to face the decision of perhaps finding a replacement. I don't necessarily carry that proverbial list in our back pocket, even though that's sort of an analogy that people use. Having said that, we do watch for prospective coaches. It may come in the form of a coach that's currently a head coach somewhere else, or maybe a top assistant in that sport. And there isn't really much of a scientific process as people would think. Obviously, in hiring people, there isn't any guarantee. They might be very successful where they are and go to another place and not be successful for whatever reason. So we try to find the individuals that best fit the profile that's important for the University of Oklahoma. And that's a long process. Sometimes you get in a position where you're hiring a coach and it's something you didn't expect, but we have to be prepared. And that doesn't always mean you're going to get who you have on that list. Okay. And it doesn't always mean that who you have on your list is the right person. You don't necessarily know until you get further into the process.
In about 15 seconds we have left, what do you do to check the backgrounds to make sure there's not something lurking out there in the past that will come back to haunt you like we've seen at other institutions recently?
Well, there's a specific process we go through. There's a criminal, credit, education, job history, and an NCAA background check. Yeah. But a lot of that is handled direct contact with people that have associated with that particular coach through their previous part of their career.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry we're out of time.
We are?
Yep, we are, and it's really good to see you again.
That's good.
Appreciate you coming. Folks, we've been visiting with Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, highly successful and running very good programs. We're pleased he'd join us. See you in a minute. Welcome back. We were really thrilled today to have Joe Castiglione join us. He's always so nice to spend some time with us and talk about the interesting topics of discussion in the state relating to college athletics and what he's trying to do about them. He is in control of a multi-million-dollar enterprise at the University of Oklahoma, and many would say, some would argue that college athletics is, quote, out of control, close quote. If anything, it is the most controlled business activity in the United States. An athletic director has to pay attention to federal law, Title IX, etc., has to pay attention to state law, state antitrust law, state business law, the Oklahoma legislature, the NCAA regulations, the conference regulations, and the fan reaction at the same time, which is somewhat controlling sometimes. In any event, a very highly regulated business that's being run very well at both of our major Division I universities, Oklahoma State University and the University of Oklahoma, by very, very capable people. I want to encourage you to get on our website, theverdict.tv, and let us know what you think, what show you'd like to see. We will be bringing you interesting topics in the near future. Not too long after this show, we'll be airing a show, a one-hour debate on tort reform, which is a hot topic in the state now, and one that we will probably see some activity on out of the Oklahoma legislature. We'll have two fine debater guests to enter into a formal, timed, structured debate and hopefully provide you good information. Finally, on a personal note, go Heritage Hall, Lady Chargers, take state. See you next week.